listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome into a new episode of the GM Shuffle. I'm Grace Remington with Michael Lombardi, getting you ready for week 3 of the NFL season. Lots to talk about on this show, but we will start with Thursday night football between the Patriots and the Jets. Michael, the Jets finding themselves in uncharted territory here. They have been favored just once against the Patriots since 2002. So they're aiming for a little changing of the guard here, and Aaron Rodgers suiting up for what we hope will be his first complete game at MetLife Stadium. What are your keys to the game in this one?
Well, I mean, this is the first time my man Bobby Saleh has been in the lead. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they react. Now, in talking to a bunch of people around the Jets, they haven't had an opportunity to practice. I think this is their third game in 11 days. So it'll be fascinating to see what kind of pad level they have, what kind of physicality they have. And this game's really all about the script, Grace, because when you look at the teams, you know New England can only play a certain style. They've got to play from in front. They've got to be able to run the ball. They got 75 rushing attempts in 2 games. They threw for 100 yards against Seattle. They're not winning this game if Jacoby Brissett has to throw it more than 25 times. No chance. But they have a chance if they can run, and the Jets have given up 130 yards or more in the last 2 games. What I find fascinating in digging deep into this game is the Jets offense is 12 yards better after 2 games than it was all of last season after 2 games. And they both average 5.1 yards per attempt, the Jets 23 version to the Jets 24 version. So we haven't seen the Jets, for all this conversation about being great offensively, we haven't seen them that way. And, you know, they haven't been able to get the ball down the field. Mike Williams isn't 100%. I think we'll see Gonzalez. If this were a Belichickian type team, Gonzalez would take Lassard and they would double Garrett Wilson on every single play. But I don't know if Covington's going to do that, the new defense coordinator. Look, I think the other part about this game, Grace, that's really important is this Patriot offensive line. They're going to go into the Meadowlands and have to start 2 rookies. And you know that's never easy.
Yeah, Jacoby Brissett has been under pressure on 44% of his passing plays. That is the second highest rate in the league. Now the entire left side of the line is out. And I know we've been dissing on the Jets defense, but they're actually getting pressure on quarterbacks at a high rate too. So something to watch there, battle of the trenches. 6-point game tonight. We'll be recapping it next week on the Monday episode. But let's get into our NFL news and notes presented by Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka. Please drink responsibly. Wow, Michael. Bryce Young, former #1 overall pick, already benched 2 games into his second season. Yeah. And it's crazy. Flashback to draft night. David Tepper is telling everyone, we're going to the Super Bowl. Well, he ended up going 2-16. What do you make out of this situation and such a quick benching for this guy?
It's kind of interesting. After the game, Dave Canales, the head coach of the Panthers, said that he wasn't going to bench him. And then after thought, talking to Brant Tillis and Dan Morgan, I guess those 2 guys are experts on football and quarterbacking play. Shocking that they decided that it was all Bryce Young's fault. Look, I'm not trying to sit here and defend Bryce Young. He converted 2 third downs in 22 attempts. But just for the record, just so we get this straight, Patrick Mahomes has only converted 5 third downs so far this season. Now, I'm not comparing the 2 players, but it hasn't been the league of great passing. We know this. And when you spend your whole offseason telling everybody how you've improved the inside pocket of your offensive line, how you're building this team around Bryce Young, how you waste a second-round pick for a running back who's injured and he's still on PUP when you've paid Miles Sanders and when you have Chuba Hubbard. I mean, look, I get Brooks could be a really good player, but it's amazing. I mean, Dan Morgan was involved with every single decision that went on in Carolina when Scott Federer was there, and all of a sudden now he's got absolution. Like, this just, to me, speaks to how poorly run this team is. You know, they have no plan for the quarterback. Right? They start the summer off. We don't need to see Bryce Young in the first preseason game. Why would we? We don't need to see their offensive line. Why would we? Then in week 2, we don't need to see Bryce Young. And then if they put him out there in week 3 and he throws 8 passes and we say, we've seen enough. Oh, you've seen enough? Have you really? Like, how do you even know how to evaluate your own team when you don't play them in the preseason? Like, this is just truly coaching and executive malpractice at the highest level in Carolina. And it continues to go on. You know why it continues to go on, Grace? Because there's nobody there who knows anything about how to build a championship football team. So everything looks right. I mean, I'm sure Dan Morgan's got all the answers. It looks right for him. Like, seriously, some of the signings and decisions they've made, you just scratch your head. Again, I'm not sitting here trying to say Bryce Young's going to be a star, but Bryce Young isn't as bad as he looks. But the Carolina Panthers are as bad as they look. I mean, they can't stop the run. That game against the Chargers wasn't even competitive. Forget the game against the Saints wasn't. I mean, these are two games that weren't competitive. They're behind 50-3 at halftime. 50-3 at halftime. Now, look, I know Bryce turned the ball over, but he wasn't playing defensive line, nor was he playing in the secondary. J.C. Horn's a complete give up a touchdown every single game. So to me, there's got to be an adult in the room, right? There's got to be somebody who really understands we're on the right course. Like, this is the problem with most organizations, is who is the expert in the building? Like, who is the voice of authority? When I worked for San Francisco, there was never a doubt. Bill Walsh, what he did. When I worked for New England, it was Belichick. When I worked for the Raiders, it was Al Davis. Now, I'm not comparing Dan Morgan to Al. I'm not comparing Dan Morgan to Walsh. I'm not comparing Dave. But somebody who's the expert in the Carolina building. See, this is what I think's happened to the NFL. We have so many people that think they're the expert in the building, when they don't really have a clue of what's going on. And so that person is making decisions that affect everybody's job moving forward. And just because you're the head coach doesn't mean you are the expert in the building. You've been given that title, but have you really earned it? I mean, think about Dave Canales' career. He starts out in Seattle as a strength coach. He works his way up. Great, does that. But Pete Carroll never says to him, hey, Dave, I think you should be my offensive coordinator. He lets him go. He goes to Tampa. He has one good year. But that doesn't qualify you for an expert. See, there's people that have expert knowledge and there's people that have superficial knowledge. And what's happened in the NFL, Grace, is we're allowing these people with superficial knowledge to make decisions, starting with David Tepper in Carolina.
Looking back at that Chargers game, I was wondering, why didn't they bench Bryce Young at halftime? And I kind of left that game thinking, well, maybe it was an ownership decision because they wanted to prove they didn't waste draft capital on this guy. But I'm trying to read between the lines of these quotes that are now, coming out of the locker room and press conferences. Because at first, Dave Canales was asked, was this your decision or Tepper's? And he said something along the lines of no comment. But then Adam Schefter reported this was Dave Canales' first big boy decision. And Deontay Johnson, after the game, he was asked after the game if he was surprised about the play calling. He said, we all are, but it is what it is. We're not the ones calling the plays. So that made me wonder, does Canales feel like he's losing the locker room and then he sees the short leash on the guy that came before him in Frank Reich? So he doesn't have ties to Bryce Young, right? Because it wasn't his decision, but he was hired in part.
Well, he does have ties. He doesn't get the job if it's not for Bryce Young. If Bryce Young played good, he wouldn't have got the job. I mean, so his job was to make Bryce Young play good. See, here's where we're missing a big point. Part of preseason is to evaluate your team. Part of preseason is to understand, as a head coach, what you have to do to set your team up to have success. That's part of being a head coach in the preseason. It isn't just sitting there looking at your play sheet, right? We just wrote a whole article about founders' knowledge and how founders work, and in the Daily Coach. And I think it's so damn important. I think any young coach, you should read this column. Any young leader should read this column, because it talks about the owner of Airbnb. And he goes into a whole conversation about how when he started Airbnb that, he was really in founder's mode. Every single detail he wanted to cover, every single thing that happened within that building, he knew what he wanted. He had a dream, he had a vision, and he was relentless in pursuit of that. Okay, and then when Airbnb became popular and it became famous, everybody in the community, the organizational community, all these big people said, no, now you got to hire the right people and let them run it. And then what happened? Airbnb went in the tubes. So there's a difference between founder mode and manager mode. And that's what happens in the NFL. You got people that don't understand how to be a founder. And so you got a bunch of managers trying to run. There's no vision in Carolina. I mean, they sign these two guards. They pay one guy $100 million. They pay another guy $50 million. And after 2 weeks, they can't run the football. Well, maybe it's more of a scheme issue. Maybe it's more of a design issue. I think, to me, there's got to be an expert in there to say, wait a minute, hold on. We need to do more of this. We need to do more of that. But they don't have that. Dan Morgan can't do that. Dan Morgan couldn't do that in a million years. I don't know that. I've met Dan Morgan. I've been to a seminar with him. To me, I don't have any grudge against Dan Morgan at all. I just watch what they're doing. But in terms of building a team, no chance. Like, is he going to walk into a coach? Like, every time I think about this, I think about, okay, who could stand up to Al Davis? Like, who would be able to go in and have a football conversation with Al Davis about this football team? To me, if you can do that, you got a chance to be able to hang in this wall. If you can't do that, you got no chance. And too often, these guys are they're just pretending that they have all the answers when they really don't. I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you something. If you put me in that building, I'm not even in the building and I know what's wrong with it. You put me in that building, I'm going to figure out what's wrong with the team. And I'm not going to bail on it after 2 weeks and blame the poor kid who we spent a first-round pick on. If there's anybody to get blame on, it's Nicole Tepper and it's David Tepper. I mean, if Dan Morgan doesn't cozy up to Nicole Tepper, do you think he's got this job? Of course not. Of course not. I mean, it's all politics. It's all politics. And you wonder why they can't win? Come on, please.
Yeah, I was about to say, the way owners view some of these sports teams these days, it's kind of just like a passion project or a hobby. So I was going to ask, when you talk about founder mode, is that referring to the Teppers, or do you want to see that out of Canales and Dan Morgan?
I want to see that out of Canales. Like, I want Canales to walk in there and have a vision. See, that's half the problem. Most of these guys that get head coaching jobs, they don't even understand what they want to be. When you're a founder, you have a vision for the company. If you get, I know you don't like blood and guts and all that, but David Chase, who wrote The Sopranos, you know, they just did this special. It was fabulous, and we'll talk about it after the break some more. But he was involved with every single detail that went on to that. That was his project. That was his baby. There was not one line that was uttered on that show that he didn't approve of. Not one. Not one curse word, not one A, not one and, not one not one the slang word, nothing. He approved everything because that was his baby. Where's Dave Canales' baby? Like, what's his passion project? Like, yours is to get this thing going. And to me, I think when you don't have that, you give up so easy. Oh, we'll try something else. Good luck trying. Andy Dalton, good luck. He'll play better than Young, but can you win? No chance.
He will play better than Young, at least according to the market. The spread's showing he's worth at least 1.5 points toward the Panthers' side. We'll get into it more on the other side of this break. And coming up next, we'll also look into more NFL news. You're listening to the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome back into the GM Shuffle, presented by Smirnoff. We do game days. Please drink responsibly. The Smirnoff Co., New York, New York. So, Michael, let's pick up our conversation about Bryce Young again. This could turn out to be the worst number 1 overall draft pick in NFL history, considering everything the Panthers gave up to get him and the other quarterbacks they passed in the draft to take him instead. So you'd like to think they will put in a little bit more effort to turn this thing around. When do you think we'll see Bryce Young again suiting up for the Panthers?
I mean, if Andy Dalton gets hurt, I assume that's going to be, when you pull the plug this quick, you can't tell me this was a one-time quick decision. I mean, to me, this has been going on. Now, I understand after the third preseason game, you said you've seen enough of Bryce and you were delighted with his progress. That's what Canales said. They're not my words, they're his words. So I don't know. I mean, to me, what I have a problem with is when you are involved in something, when you start a business like Brian Chesky did in terms of Airbnb, you put your heart and soul into it. You say, look, this is what I'm going to do. When Canales got that job, I'm going to make this guy a good player. I'm going to do everything I can. My heart and soul's in this. I mean, after 2 weeks, you're going to give up on it. I don't know how you put him back in. You know, they say they're not going to trade him. That's a shocker. I mean, you've given up all these draft picks for the guy. I mean, you're going to have to rehabilitate him, but that's what you did when you hired Canales. The fact that Tepper didn't even interview Belichick for a head coaching job, and he hired Canales and Dan Morgan, like, seriously, you're really telling your team you want to win when you hire Dan Morgan and you hire Dave Canales, and you're saying, hey, we can win with that. No, what you're saying is Nicole, his wife, wants to have a voice. You're saying David wants to have a voice, and because they want to have a voice, we're going to find people that will allow them to have a voice. But that eliminates expertise in your building. So to me, I think Bryce Young, the best thing Bryce Young can do is just watch from the sidelines, because it ain't going to get any better. I mean, the team's poorly built. The team isn't going to get better.
One more question before we move on from this. You see a lot at the college ranks. Coach will bench their starting quarterbacks or even put them back into a quarterback competition, make them third string for the week, just so they can kind of take a breather and earn that confidence back. When you're watching the Chargers game tape with Bryce Young, there is no confidence there. He's feeling pressure
None.
that isn't even there, making really bad third down decisions. But at the same time, you're a grown man at this point, making millions of dollars. Do you see coaches kind of making moves like this to help a player get their confidence back? Just how realistic is that situation here?
Well, I think if Bill Walsh would have been named the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, the thing he would have done is restore his confidence in the offseason. Bill Walsh would have worked absolutely every single day with Bryce Young. And in preseason, he would have given him all the confidence he needed. He started the preseason out building confidence, tell him where he wants him to throw the ball. It would not have started when they got the trade. It would have started the minute that he came in the building. I got to repair this kid. This kid's broken. He played 17 games, got the shit kicked out of him. I got to repair this kid. He's broken. And so now after 2 weeks, there's no trust between Canales and Bryce Young, because I'm sure Canales was telling Young all the things he wanted to hear to build his confidence up. And now after 2 weeks, you bench me. How do I trust you ever again? You've just eliminated trust. We're talking about leadership here. We're not talking about X's and O's. This is why the league is so screwed up. We spend no time on leadership. We spend no time on understanding how to develop players, how to build an infrastructure that allows you to build a winning championship organization. So now he's got no confidence. He's got no trust. And his career is just going to dangle. And he's got Baker Mayfield saying, look, this happened to me before. And I understand it. Sam Darnold, it happened to me before. I understand it. Until you get with the right coach, it ain't going to matter. I think that's where they're headed. And I think it's going to be a problem. I think you can just see it coming down the road. And look, as long as we have guys like that think they know what they're doing, that have no clue what they're doing, you're going to have this. That's why, as Walsh said to me in 1984, we're only competing against 8 teams. Like, you really think Carolina's a team you're competing against? Of course not. It's a joke.
Yeah, well, the Panthers are 31-70 in David Tepper's era since he took over in 2019, the worst record in the NFL during that span. So not just a quarterback problem there, but hoping it all works out for Bryce Young. Let's move on to some more news here. The Dolphins have officially placed quarterback Tua Tagovailoa on the injured reserve after suffering a concussion. Mike McDaniels used the word empowering, saying that giving him a month to to heal with no timelines will take away some of that anxiety. What do you think about Tua going on the IR here?
Well, I don't think they had a choice. I think that was the right, smart decision to make. I don't have the medical evidence in front of me, but I know this. If they don't give this time to really kind of separate itself and have him heal and feel really good about it, the next one's going to cause him to miss the season. And look, Mike McDaniel's going to have to earn his money now. I mean, it's all fun and games. You wear your pants up high. You can pretend you're the disc jockey of the team. But at some point, you're going to have to prove you can with your backup quarterback. You got to prove that you can go in there, and we're going to find out what their deficiencies are. Look, the two teams that jump out to you about the worst team building you can have are the Miami Dolphins and the Chicago Bears, right? Caleb Williams, who we'll get to later in the show, or maybe we won't even because it's a relevant game, but the kid's got the shit knocked out. He's on course with Bryce Young, too. Of course, now the Chicago Bears told us all off summer that we really improved this offensive line. It's a comedy, right? We got to have another skill player, out there to go and run around. But, we all know that what matters is offensive lineman. Same thing in Miami. I mean, are you shocked Teron Armstead's hurt? So, he's hurt? Oh, my God, that's a shocking news to me. I never saw that one coming, right? So I think, to me, it's going to be, they had no choice. Now we're going to find out what McDaniel wants to do. I think he's got a team. He goes out and plays Seattle this week. We'll see if they can actually function and play well against Seattle, which they should. I mean, Seattle's been in 2 close games. Seattle's trying to find out who they are as well. And I think, to me, when you look at them, I mean, they barely beat Denver by 6, and they barely beat New England. Those are not 2 great teams. So Miami should be in this one. I mean, Seattle allows over 4.7 yards per carry. But one thing, we all talk about how Achan's such a great runner. He's only at 3.8. Miami hasn't played good in 2 games. They're 1-1. They should be 0-2. So, and they've allowed 41 points in the first half. So they're playing from behind, which Miami doesn't want to do with that shitty offensive line. So I think, to me, this is an opportunity now for McDaniels to show that he's more than a disc jockey, that he's more going to make the players happy. I think he's got to go out there and they got to play good, and especially since Seattle doesn't have Kenneth Walker. Without Kenneth Walker, I think it really makes a big difference. I mean, Charbonneau wasn't very good. He averaged 2.3 yards a carry against New England last week. Walker was over 5 against Denver, who has a decent defense. I mean, Pittsburgh couldn't run the ball in Denver's defense. Pittsburgh still hasn't really run the ball. I mean, the great thing about Pittsburgh is they haven't run the ball well, nor have they thrown the ball very effectively, but they've won 2 games. Why? Because they got leadership and they have a head coach who knows how he's doing it. So, look, the Dolphins are on extended rest. They've got opportunity to game plan, but the problem is when you look at them, the numbers don't favor them on extended rest. They're 3-3 straight up when they've had more than 6-7 days to prepare under Mike McDaniel.
All right. Well, moving ahead, the winless Colts taking another loss. Their Pro Bowl defensive tackle, DeForest Buckner, has been placed on the IR with a right high ankle sprain, and he's one of those Iron Men in the NFL. He's played 9 seasons, had only missed just 1 game before this, and that's playing 75% of his team's defensive snaps. So what does this loss do for this already not so great Colts defense?
Well, I mean, look, let's face it. The Colts defense is atrocious. I mean, they play one front. Everybody knows what they're going to be in. I mean, the Colts have faced 93 rushes in 2 games. Now, here's a really important stat. They have faced 93 rushes in 2 games, okay? The longest run they've given up is 34 yards. So it isn't like they've given up a bunch of yards, right? They've had one long run of 34, and yet they've given up all these yards every single week in the passing game. They're the team you can run the ball on everybody. Like, that says a lot about your run defense, right? When teams are running at 93, that's over 40 times a game in 2 games. This is the NFL. I mean, you're not playing one of the institutions. You're not playing a service academy here. I mean, and then just to throw a little more salt on the wound, I mean, the Gus Bradley, we know where you are. You don't move around. We're going to exactly attack you. They give up 78.3% of the completion percentage. Like, every week, if you really want to study the game and you want to study good defenses, you look at the incomplete passes the opposing quarterback throws. That means you got your hands on the football. That means you're making plays on the ball. Like, that's one of the things Baltimore can't do. Baltimore can't play pass defense. Baltimore, I think, has had broken up 6 passes all in 2 games, and 2 of them came from Roquan Smith. If you're not checking those numbers every week when you're preparing for a game, incomplete passes, how many are we forcing? What are unforced errors and what are forced errors? And the Colts never have a forced error. They maybe have an unforced error, but to me, they're going against a team that can't protect. They're going against a team that can't protect. And they also haven't been able to run the ball. The Bears average 2.97 yards per rush. They can't knock anybody off the ball. They couldn't knock Notre Dame off the ball. This is a soft offensive line. This is what drives you crazy. Like, they're a soft offensive line. They play in Chicago with Windy City. It's cold. It's rainy. It's nasty. You got to punch somebody in the mouth. Like, you got to be able to get yourself into the trenches, And now we got Tevin Jenkins is hurt. They have no backup lineman. Of course, everybody's worried. Keenan Allen's injured. Oh, no. They put DeAndre Carter in there. They didn't miss Keenan Allen. They just put him in there. So, to me, it's like, look, this is about if the Colts can't rush the passer here, and if they can't stop the Bears from running, I feel bad for Colts fans.
One more injury we want to get to here quickly. Packers quarterback Jordan Love returns to practice Wednesday for the first time since his injury in Brazil. He did some warm-ups. He threw the ball to teammates during Indy. His official practice participation listed as limited, but there's reports out there saying he's a 50-50 go for this Sunday, potentially rooting the Malik Willis revenge game against the Titans. How realistic do you think it is that Jordan Love suits up?
Oh, I think it is real. Look, I think the number moved. So that tells you all you need to know, Grace. The number moved. It was 2.5 and went down to 1. I mean, he moved that number just by walking out in the practice field. Look, one thing, LaFleur did a great job. Even Big Daddy admitted it. He did a great job. But LaFleur's not going to be able to screw people around in week 2. He's already declared he's running the single wing. But if Willis plays, now it's a different game because it's going to be hard to run the ball in Tennessee. It's going to be hard to run the ball in Tennessee, whether Willis plays or whether Love plays. It's going to be hard. I think that's going to be the huge challenge. We'll see. But to me, that's why that number moved. 50-50. Look, I think, if he's not going to hurt himself any further, I bet he plays.
Yeah, it is interesting because the initial report said he'd be out 2 to 6 weeks. If he's already out there practicing, looks like that timetable's a little earlier than we thought. Okay, after the break, We're getting into some of these top games in week 3. Massive line movement. Are they overreaction? We'll get into it next on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome back into the GM Shuffle, getting you ready for week 3 of the NFL season. The Chicago Bears 1-1 heading into Indianapolis as a 1.5-point road dog. Caleb Williams leading the way. It's kind of hard to say he's leading much of anything, Michael.
Oh, man.
He's looking like, the scrambling around at USC playing hero ball doesn't work. Doesn't quite work the same way in the NFL. What is your assessment of him through 2 games?
Well, I mean, again, it's about, who are we going to become? Like, who are we? You got a rookie quarterback. You got an offensive line that can't knock anybody off the ball. You have a nickel runner in Swift. You don't have any power in your offense, and yet you want the kid to be automatic. Like, you're just going to say, okay, Caleb, take us to the promised land. And, of course, all the Bears bettors are betting them on their over win total because they're so excited. And I think, to me, you can't get excited because the Bears are down 33-13 in the first half. So they're playing from behind all the time. That doesn't help a rookie quarterback at all. They have no real power in their offensive line. I mean, he really has a struggle when he plays against the blitz. His quarterback rating is a 4.9 passer rating versus the blitz in week 2 versus Houston. That is the worst in any game since Next Gen Stats came into play. Since 2016 with a minimum of 20 dropbacks. I mean, think about that. When he was 3 for 12 for 15 yards, he was sacked 5 times in week 2. I mean, it's the most sacks allowed by the Chicago Bears since week 17 of 2022 when they played Detroit. I mean, it's the second 7+ sacks for Houston's defense. Like, it was a feeding frenzy. And to me, this is all about bad lines don't travel. Go back to that saying. I said it all the time. I was the idiot who picked the Rams, and I knew bad lines don't travel. So I have nobody to blame but myself. And being stupid and going against a true belief of my own. To me, I feel bad for Caleb Williams. Like, I feel bad for what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, Shane Waldron's trying to work within the framework of what he has. But you go down to New Orleans, and they're under center more than any team. They got a lead fullback. See, nobody can run the football because everybody knows how to handle these one-back runs and offset. But you get into 2-backs where teams don't practice enough against 2-back runs, and all of a sudden that starts to come into play. To me, you don't want to always do what everybody else does. You want to zig when somebody else is zagging. Like, I don't understand this urgency to get Caleb Williams under center all the time. Like, I think, to me, you've got to be able to get him to the point where, we got to get him under center with shotgun. Like, there's no play action pass. Make the game easier for him. But, I'm preaching to the choir here.
I mean, do you see this being a bounce back spot, though, for him against this Colts defense?
I would say, to me, if they can't move the ball against a Colt defense who's going to be in the same front. I mean, here's the thing about the Colts. Whatever you practice on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, based on the cards, that's what the Colts defense is going to be in. There's going to be no confusion whatsoever. Gussie's going to be in his under front. He's going to be exactly what you want him to be. So those cards on Wednesday that you go practice against, they hold up and say, okay, this is what we do. That's what's going to be. And that's why it's so easy to play the Colts, because there's no level of uncertainty. There's no confusion. There's no hidden attack. There's nothing. There's no game plan. I mean, there's just one little, we're going to play this. We're going to play palms. You just got to play faster. You got to play harder. That's just a cop-out for the players.
Definitely feels like that one will be a high variance game. But let's take a look at games that will be a bit more competitive. The Eagles and Saints. We've seen a 6-point swing in this one. The Saints were a 3-point underdog. Now they are a 2.5-point favorite, just based on the results of last week. Saints obviously blowing out the Cowboys and the Eagles giving one away to the Falcons. You think this line movement is justified, Michael?
Well, I mean, from the eye test, right? If you just look at the way the Eagles have played it, and one of the things, and I think, to me, you have to be worried about the Eagles is, and I've said this many times, and I believe this, when your Mike linebacker is slow, your defense is slow. And I know the Eagles don't want to put any money in their defensive linebacker. I get that. I'm not in love with paying linebackers either, but I do think middle linebackers that are fast make your defense much better. It's just a fact. When your Mike backers slow, your defense is slow. You can't run the field. Now, compounding the problem in Philadelphia is their edges are small. I mean, Nolan Smith is an old school Sam linebacker. He has no position in today's game other than nickel rusher. That's it. He's just being, and no, he's a first round pick, but he has to be a nickel rusher. He has to be a sub rusher on a down where you're not going to get a run. See, Bryce Huff is a sub rusher too, and they're trying to play him on downs where there is runs, and then he just gets loaded out of there. He's playing too small. Their edges are too small. I mean, think about this. They had 70 sacks 2 years ago. 60 came from their defensive front. This year they've played 2 games. They got 1 sack from their defensive lineman, Milton Williams. That's it. That's it. And it's hard. And their team speed is not good enough. I mean, all those idiots that said they should have gone for it on 4th down because, 6 is a bad number in football. I mean, that was ridiculous. I mean, that's one of the dumbest things I ever heard in all my life. I was talking to Belichick last week, when we were at NFL Films on Tuesday doing the coach podcast, and we were talking about, that situation where people in the analytical community, there's a place for analytics, don't get me wrong, but they thought, well, he should have gone for it on 4th down because it improved that percentage of win. And what improved the percentage of win? If you ran it on 3rd down, reduce the game by 7 plays, right? You could have reduced the game by 7 plays because that clock would have run down. And then you could have kicked the field goal and you could have protected the outside sidelines. And all of a sudden now you got a chance to get off the field with a sack or a pressure. And Kirk Cousins can't waltz up and down the field. The other thing I think that's really, look, Philly's given up 13.5 per catch, 7.8 on a per attempt. I mean, they're not good enough. They're not good enough on defense. I think it's a real issue.
Yeah, I think the Eagles, when you look at the first 2 games, they have dominated both of those games. I believe they're the only team in the NFL right now that has 8 drives of 10-plus plays. You just had that coaching miscue in the first quarter, and then the end of the game decision. And then once the Falcons got the ball back, they were playing prevent defense or just weren't organized. But in the long run, it doesn't have anything to do with the team's ability, right? So they should – I feel like our expectations for the Eagles shouldn't change that much. Because those were coaching decisions.
But look, Grace, look, they've controlled the ball for 30. Their offense has controlled the ball for 34 minutes in games, and they're only 10 for 27 on 3rd down. So that's amazing. And they've only allowed 5 3rd down conversions in 2 games from their defense, and yet they've allowed 800 yards in 2 games. They're giving up 6.9 yards per play. I mean, think about that. And they've only gained 5.5. Could you imagine? Their defense is doing exactly what I think they should do, is play less defense. But even to me, I've always said this before on the podcast, if you want to play great defense, play less defense. Well, the Eagles have played less defense. The problem is they're giving up 6.9 yards per play. When they're on the field, they're getting smoked. If they ever had to play 34 minutes, they'd give up 40 points. I think it's a talent issue. I really do. I don't think they can cover. They're not rushing the passer very good. They have no speed in the inside of their defense, and they miss a ton of tackles. And then, can I add one more thing to you? I don't think they're in great shape. And now they're going to go down the dome where it's hot, it's humid in New Orleans. People say, well, it's air conditioned inside. You watch the overall condition of the Eagles in the 4th quarter. If this is a close game in the 4th quarter, I want to see that the Eagles have improved their level of conditioning. I'm not sure. I didn't see it against the Falcons on Sunday. I was really disappointed. They don't play off blocks. I mean, the Eagles' run fits are a disaster. There's no run fits. Belichick's commented on the Manning cast. He said, look, when they were in a kind of almost like a goal line defense down there, they played really physical. They shed, they 2-gap, they got off the block. But now everybody wants to run up the field. They're all swimmers. They got a bunch of swimmers. I mean, they got Michael Phelps in their defensive line. Everybody's running up the field.
Well, let's talk about the other side before we move on to another game, because I think there's a lot of people wondering, are the Saints legit? The first week almost doesn't even count against the Panthers. That was essentially a scrimmage, like a preseason scrimmage. But once you beat the Cowboys and doing it the way they did, that deserves some attention. So what are your thoughts on the Saints so far?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, they won 4 of the last 5 games down the stretch last year. Carr threw 14 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions. They played really well. They fired Pete Carmichael. They bring in Clint Kubiak. They've gotten better on offense. All that nonsense, well, you have to draft a receiver early. Rashid Shaheed was on the practice squad. I mean, Ryan Poles could have taken him off of the Saints practice squad last year, 2 years ago, or whenever it was. He wouldn't have had to draft Rome Odunze. He would have had the best receiver on his team. Like, this guy gets behind the defense on every single play. Receivers you can find some guys. I'm not saying you're going to find Jamar Chase out there on a free agent board, but you can find guys who can contribute to your team. And so, they find a receiver. The left tackle's elite. They draft this kid who's played really well. He's secured the left side of the offensive line, which was huge for the Saints last year. Carr had no protection. We know Carr, if he gets hit, he's going to have problems. So they're protecting. And then the defense is good. I mean, Dennis Allen's a really good defensive coordinator. They're smart. They have experience on defense. They make great calls. They communicate. They know how to make it hard for the quarterback. They're the anti-Gus Bradley defense. They're going to be in different looks. They're going to show you different fronts. They're going to solve some issues as the game goes along. They're going to create some havoc. I think, look, the left tackle's good. The quarterback's playing at an elite level. They've got skill. And Kamara, who I was completely wrong on, I thought Kamara was trending in the wrong direction. Well, against Dallas, he looked like he found a rebirth. He was coming back. So I think they're for real. I don't think you can deny what they've done. I mean, they're under center. Their defense is playing good, and their offense is really good. So they know who they are. Kubiak has given them an identity. He's in manager. He's in founders mode. Everything's going through him. He understands what Kyle does.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch the Saints team, especially Alvin Kamara, 4 touchdowns. He says the sky's the limit for this team, so he's in good spirits. Meanwhile, on the other side of that, the Cowboys got crushed so bad that they are now a home dog. The Ravens coming into Dallas as a 1-point favorite. So this one essentially a pick 'em now, which means the Ravens basically have a 50-50 shot of starting this season 0-3. And we got about a minute here before we go to a break. So we will pick up this conversation for sure. But just your initial thoughts on this one being a pick'em game.
Well, I think it's a lot to the Cowboy injury. CeeDee Lamb didn't practice yesterday. We saw Brandon Cooks. He's nicked up. Zach Martin's nicked up. They're all nicked up. Jake Ferguson's probably not going to play. Mozzie Smith. I mean, the defensive tackle position for this team is if Baltimore doesn't win this game and run the ball down the Cowboys' throat, then I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I have no answer for Baltimore. But Baltimore should be able to, and they can run the football. I mean, the problem Baltimore has is their offensive line isn't as good, and then the other issue is their defense. I mean, they've given up 34 points in the second half, 20 in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's where you lose. You got to win games in the fourth quarter. You got to make adjustments. And I've said it last week on the pod. I mean, Zach Moore's a young coach. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, Ravens, such a defensive force last year, giving up 20 points to close a game. All right, coming up on the other side of this break, we'll get deeper into this Ravens-Cowboys matchup and continue to preview these Week 3 games. You're listening to the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome back into the GM Shuffle. We're getting deeper into this Ravens-Cowboys conversation. And Michael, that Ravens loss to the Raiders, they're still a favorite at Dallas because that's how bad the Cowboys' loss to the Saints was. And a quote that I thought was pretty funny was Micah Parsons said he felt like he was in a maze with how much motion Kubiak's offense was using. But when you look at this matchup here, what stands out the most to you?
Well, look, the Cowboys are vulnerable inside. I mean, they traded for Jordan Phillips. He was horrendous last week. Maisie Smith's hurt. He wasn't very good. I mean, they can't control the middle of the field. I mean, when you can't stop the opponent from running the ball up and down the field, your defensive coordinator, there's nothing. You have to gimmick your way through it. And look, Baltimore's offensive line isn't nearly as good as New Orleans was playing. So, but to me, I think Baltimore needs to get in there and run their heavy package and kind of put it down their throat. Now, they have a hard time. I mean, Zay Flowers averages under 10 yards a catch. I mean, everybody wants the Ravens to be explosive. I think the Ravens need to go back to their identity, run Henry, play action. I still think they should be booting. Look, I'm on we see a different game, me and the Ravens offensively. I think it should be a boot, naked, under center game. I think if Lamar was in the Saints offense, he could be deadly in that because of all the bootlegs and throw it down the field and try to make some plays. But I think the Cowboys are a wounded duck right now. Look, this is another game where it's all about who plays from in front, right? It's all about who can get the lead and who can play from in front. That's going to be critical. And then for the Ravens, if they do that, like they did against the Raiders, they got to be able to close the lead. They got to be able to close it out. Look, the one thing I know about this game, the Cowboys are not a very good run team. They don't have a great run game. And you can't run the ball in the Ravens. The Ravens give up less than 3 yards a carry in the run game in 2 games. And then the Raiders wanted to run it. They couldn't. So this is going to be a pass game. Dak's going to have to throw it. Now, Nate Wiggins was hurt last week. I don't know if he'll play this week, but the Ravens are not as talented in the secondary as they need to be, especially considering when they play Marlon Humphreys on the outside. That's a matchup that favors the defense. Marlon Humphrey's a good corner inside, not outside.
Yeah, it's a must-win game for Baltimore, as no Super Bowl champion has ever started a season 0-3. Let's move on to some other games here. We have the Titans and Vikings, both 2-0, both leading their division, and this line has gotten shorter. Houston was the 4-point favorite on the look-ahead line. They are a 2-point favorite now as they hit the road. What are your keys to this game?
Well, I mean, look, this is one of those games where C.J. Stroud has not played as well on the road as he typically does at home. This Texan offense is going or humming. I don't know what Joe Mixon's status is going to be in this game. I don't think, based on what happened last week, that's a concern. I think the biggest concern when you play Minnesota in that dome is how hot it is in there. It's like a greenhouse, Grace. With all the glass, I think San Francisco kind of was caught a little bit off guard last week because it was hot in there. Even though you're in the air conditioning, the sun is shining through and the players are getting heated up. You got to get used to that. Look, I think to me, one of the things that Houston benefited at home with the crowd noise, they were able to put a lot of pressure. I think Minnesota can play better in their offensive line. Darrisaw is not going to play as bad as he did against Bosa. So this is going to be a game that comes down to Minnesota can run the ball. Both backs average 5.5 yards a carry. I think that's still the Achilles heel of the Texans. Can they play the run? And they're going to have to put some pressure. Brian Flores will not make it easy for C.J. Stroud. And you got to figure out a way to take Nico Collins out of the game. I think it's a great game. It's a close game. I think both teams have really proved after the offseason with their moves that they've made. It's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, Brian Flores, you mentioned it. He and the Vikings blitzing at the second highest rate in the NFL. But something that is interesting, Michael, is C.J. Stroud has actually been thriving against the blitz this year. He's 17 for 20 with 166 yards. That's over an 8 yards per attempt average. What is he doing differently, or is that just a product of the teams he's played?
Well, I think he knows what he's doing. He's playing faster. I mean, this is what you want to see with second-year players. They struggle with something in the first year. They study it in the second year, and then they get better at it. And I think, to me, this is 7 straight starts. He hasn't thrown an interception. And this kid's been really good with the football. He protects it, and he understands how to make and he makes great throws when he needs to. And I think that you got to give Bobby Slowick credit for getting him prepared, knowing where his protection is, and getting the ball out. And the same thing with Sam Darnold. I mean, Sam Darnold's been amazing. I mean, the best he's ever averaged pass yards per attempt was 6.7. This year he's up to 9.5. I mean, his best quarterback rating was 78.7. Now he's up to 111. I mean, it's really impressive to see a professional, an expert, Kevin O'Connell's an expert, coach the guy. We have too many non-experts that think they are.
Yeah, it's been great to see the turnaround for Sam Darnold. Let's take a look at the Lions and Cardinals now, both 1-1. The Lions licking their wounds after some brutal red zone luck last week. And then you have money pouring in on Kyler Murray for MVP. So what's your outlook for this game here?
Well, look, if they don't rush Kyler, I mean, that was coaching malpractice 101 last week with the Rams. I mean, to let Kyler Murray run around and go beep was ridiculous. Buffalo did a great job on him. He averaged 5.5 yards a pass against Buffalo because Sean McDermott knew what he was doing. He rushed him inside out. He didn't let his ends run up the field. He wasn't part of a swim team. And so that really helped out. I think, to me, that's the key. Look, I think Detroit's undervalued here in the market. I know there's a lot of money coming in on the Cardinals, and the sharps love the Cardinals. I don't get it. I think this you can run the football in Arizona. I think Detroit's a really good team. They're very good against the spread. And Detroit, they deserve some criticism because if you're gonna let Jared Goff throw the ball 53 times, you deserve what you get. You really do. You deserve what you get 55 times. I mean, you got to run the rock, Montgomery, Gibbs, let them go in there and control the game, control the pace of the game. And then you've got to rush them. I mean, Dan Campbell, you've got to rush Kyler Murray the right way. You've got to win up front, and you got to rush them the right way. And I think Detroit should be able to do that. I think, to me, I see this line as undervalued for Detroit's part because, the Cardinals have allowed 5 yards per play compared to, and they've dominated the time of possession. I mean, Detroit's a good road team, but the Cardinals have been able to run the ball, but where they make their plays in the passing game is when he gets out of there. They got to control the clock. And I think the Cardinals have allowed 5.4 yards per carry, and have dominated it. I mean, that's really and they still been able to dominate the time of possession.
Okay, the Chargers-Steelers. Pittsburgh is a 1.5-point home favorite, but this total has been steamed down aggressively.
Yeah.
On the summer look-ahead line, it was 42.5. Last week it was 39.5. When it reopened this week, it was 37.5. Now here we sit at 35.5. So strong opinions, obviously, about the style of play between these two teams. How do you see this one going?
Look, I think this is all about, both quarterbacks haven't lost a game for either team. I mean, think about it. They've done a great job with Justin Fields. He's been able to, overcome. They've only run the ball for 3.6 yards. They only average 9.1 yards per catch, 6.4 per attempt. I mean, but what he's been able to do is get rid of the football. He's 8 for 8, get rid of the ball in under 2.5 seconds. So he knows where he's going with the ball. That's coaching, right? He's 14 for 14. And with one touchdown pass on throws where he's been able to have to hold the ball just a little bit longer. I mean, he's played really well. He hasn't made great plays, but he's been able to make the play based on getting the ball out of his hand quickly. That's coaching. And I think the same thing can be said for the Chargers. I mean, J.K. Dobbins has been sensational. I mean, J.K. Dobbins might be comeback player of the year. I mean, the guy's averaged 9.9 yards a carry, right? He's in a category of what some of the great running backs of all time, where he's gained 130 yards rushing in 2 games and scored touchdowns in each of the games. I mean, he's in the company of Garrison Hurst, Billy Sims, O.J. Simpson, and Jim Brown. That's pretty good. And the fact that Jim has not allowed really Herbert to kind of have to dominate the game is really important. I mean, they haven't turned the ball over. They've been very careful. They've been very effective. I just think, to me, these two teams have avoided losing. Think about this. The Steelers have forced 10 punts in 2 games. Their offense has punted 11 times in 2 games. So, and then they need a new punter this week too. But my point here is it isn't like they're doing stuff that's extraordinary. They're being very calculated. They know when to take their risk. They protect the football. They're smart with the ball, and they don't put their quarterbacks in any harm's way. And Fields hasn't thrown an interception or fumbled in 2 games. That's remarkable.
All right, let's squeeze the Chiefs and Falcons in here too. And this line getting shorter as well after the Falcons come behind win in prime time. The public loves a last-minute miracle comeback, but you could argue the Chiefs kind of did the same thing against Cincinnati. Either way, the Chiefs, a 3.5-point road favorite here. What's your key to this game?
Well, I think the question is Patrick Mahomes playing good right now? I mean, it's the lowest quarterback rating he's ever had in his career. Now, that's because he's thrown those interceptions. 47.1 quarterback career, and he hasn't, the left tackle position for the Chiefs is really a problem. And then the fact that they don't have a runner. I don't know what kind of shape Kareem Hunt's in. I doubt he's in good shape. I can't imagine Carson Steele can be the lead back. He averages 3 yards a carry. They're going to miss Pacheco. I mean, this is going to be interesting. The left tackle is a real issue. We said it all summer long. Left tackle is an issue for Kansas City. They're going to try to start a rookie. But they're going against Atlanta for all the superlatives about what they've been offensively. They're 4 for 18 on third down so far this year. They've only converted 4 of them. London, who's supposed to be this explosive receiver, he averages 8.6 yards per catch. Oh, by the way, Kyle Pitts, the number 5th pick overall in the draft, he's at 7.7. And the fact that teams have completed 75% of their passes against the Falcons defense makes me feel like this is a game where Mahomes might get back to being the Pro Bowler that he is. I mean, he has not looked the same player. And I think, to me, that's due to that he knows his left tackle isn't playing so good. And Kelsey, at some point, Kelsey's got to start to make some plays. He's under 10 yards a catch, and he doesn't look like the same player. And so this number is going towards Atlanta because of Nick Sirianni's ability to help them get the win. So I think, to me, if they fix the left tackle position, and look, we know Atlanta doesn't have a great pass rush, and you can move the ball in Atlanta. There's no question you can move it. It's who's going to be the running back.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Atlanta really overrated in this spot. All right, time to get to our DraftKings bet highlight presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Michael, what's your best bet for week 3?
I kind of like Miami this week. I know they haven't been good with Skylar Thompson, but I think you get 4.5 up in Seattle. I think it's a field goal game. Without Kenneth Walker, I think Seattle is deprived a little bit. I think Miami's defense has struggled, but I think they've had a wake-up call now, and they're going to have to find a way to play better defensively. They've got to control the run. Charbonnet was not very good running in replace of Walker. Look, Seattle's played 2 games They beat Denver by 6. They barely beat New England. So I think it'll be a close game. I think 4.5 is a little too much.
Yeah, Seattle a little bit inflated at this point. All right, well, thank you for listening. Make sure you download and subscribe to the GM Shuffle wherever you get your pods. And if you're watching on the DraftKings YouTube page, give us a thumbs up on your way out. For Michael Lombardi, I'm Grace Remington. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.